Good evening, everyone. This is 7th of May, the second session led by the Pune chapter, and which is going to be a panel discussion with the industry stalwarts like Monish, Darda, co-founder and CTO Icertis, Parag, Satpute, the managing director for Bridgestone India, and Krishna, Priya, Nambudri, head of HR, Sungard Availability Services India. The moderator is Jayshree, Kirtane, and the hosts are Gauri and Priya. This is a gift from ICF Pune to the entire coaching community across the globe. Welcome to ICW. Gauri, if you're speaking, we're not able to hear you. Can you unmute yourself?
Oh, thanks, Kalpesh. Yeah. Good evening, everybody, and we'll start our session soon. I can see people still joining in, and we already have a count of 100, so that's good, and it's growing. And I can see people from all over different locations. So super. Okay, till everybody joins in, I think we can take this. So, friends, how is the lockdown treating you, and how is your mood today? If you could just pick one word to describe your mood in the chat box, we can see how you sound today. Oh, great. I see happy, enlightened, pepped up, looking forward, motivated, excited. Super. Great, great, great. Great to see the enthusiasm from the audience. And I'm sure those who are bored will change your mood soon. We have wonderful speakers and wonderful panelists who will just, make you feel very lively. Okay, so I'm going to start. Hello, everybody. I warmly welcome you to this session on behalf of the ICF Pune chapter. Pune is always special, the Oxford of the East, our very own Punya Nagri. Pune tithe काय उने. We've had a great session just before this and an awesome coaching session between Rajat and Sushma. Uh, it's an awesome day, and what I would like to do is basically look and give a great round of applause to all the ICF chapters who've done a fabulous job so far. So, Chak De India. Okay. I'm Gauri Kacherikar, and I will be your host today. I have around 2.5 decades of experience in leading global businesses in the Nordic, and I'm passionate about nurturing people. That's what brings me towards the coaching path. Kalpesh, if you could just change the slide so then we can have the others there. Yeah. Our co-host for this session is Priya Damle. Priya is an HR advisor to the organizations and is passionate about coaching and mentoring women. Our shining star, Jayshree Kirtane, is the panel moderator. Jayshree is the president of the ICF Pune chapter also. The backend support is provided by Kalpesh Raichura. Kalpesh is a coach and business mentor and is also the director of communications to the Pune ICF chapter. I believed a good coach helps you unlock your hidden potential and maximize growth. We know the story of our master blaster of cricket, Sachin Tendulkar, and his coach Ramakant Achrekar. Indra Nui, the former CEO of Pepsi, says, I'm a product of great coaching and great mentoring. CEOs like Steve Jobs, Eric Schmidt, Bill Gates all sought out coaches to help them rise their business games. Great coaches see things differently, say things you can't say, and know things that you don't know. Our agenda for today would be a quick introduction to the ICF. What is this International Coaching Week all about? Know more about the ICF Pune chapter. Priya will then introduce the guests, and the guests will also share their stories with us. Jayshree will do the panel moderation, and then we will have the Q&A session. Friends, please don't get upset if we have to take a few questions in the interest of the time. Okay. So, what is ICF all about? So, ICF stands for International Coaching Federation. Kalpesh, you flipped one slide, please, for me. Okay. So it's a global organization that helps advancing coaching professionals. It defines professional standards for coaching. It is the main accrediting and credentializing body for the training programs as well as coaches. And it builds a great network of worldwide trained professionals. Next, please. The International Coaching Week is a global event celebrated by all the chapters across the world. The objective is to spread awareness of coaching in all segments of society. In India, it is a collaborative effort of 5 chapters: Pune, Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, and, and Mumbai. Let's take a quick look at what ICF Pune is. So our chapter is very young and has been established in 2018. The vision for this chapter is to learn from the experts, co-learn from the peers, and broaden perspectives through interactions with global chapters. I hand over to Priya to invite the speakers now.
Thanks, Gauri. Um, Good evening, everybody. And this is Priya here. I'd be introducing you to our guest speakers today. We have 3 esteemed speakers amongst us who would individually share their experience with coaching and the impacts that coaching has had with them, to them, and their organizations. After which, there would be an interesting panel discussion, which would be moderated by our very own Jayshree Kirtane, President of ICF Pune chapter. So without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, Monish Darda. A little bit about Monish. I understand this is Monish's 7th startup, so he's a serial entrepreneur. He's the co-founder and CTO of Icertis Incorporated. As we all know, Icertis last year earned and was declared a unicorn from Pune, did us proud. Icertis is the leading provider for contract lifecycle management on the cloud. Monish is a mechanical engineer with a master's from the University of Florida. He is a self-proclaimed gadget freak and gamer. He takes a keen interest in capability building of more than 800 Icertians who work out of Pune. I've been given to understand, Monish, that you have experienced coaching yourself, and that you are a proponent of coaching within your own organization to a large extent. I'd like to invite you to share your experience now. Over to you, Monish.
Thank you so much, Priya. So, it's been an interesting journey for me. As you mentioned, this is my 7th startup, and I've been working in smaller companies, high power teams, high energy teams, but much smaller teams as opposed to kind of large companies, large cultures, large change management problems, and so on and so forth. Interestingly, Icertis has been one of my largest. Obviously, co-founded Icertis in 2009. We have more than 1,200 people globally, a unicorn. So for me, the coaching challenge actually came in very late in my career. Because when you're in a startup, you think you know everything, right? You start from there. And without a little bit of that swagger, a little bit of immodesty, it is hard to live this startup life throughout. You do need coaching, but you kind of find different people, you find different circumstances, and you learn and you grow. And your primary feed, your primary mechanism of learning is really making mistakes. And I've made a lot of them. But when Icertis grew to a certain size, I thought, and I was talking to my friends, I thought, this kind of formal coaching might be a very interesting thing. I'd never believed in it, because I thought, hey, if one person can tell me how to run my business or about me and how to change myself, then something is wrong. So it's interesting to see it was an interesting experiment for me, just because somebody said, hey, why don't you try this out? And that's how my journey started. And I was fortunate enough, a friend of mine connected me to Jayshree, and we will hear from her as well. But it was very interesting to kind of look at how that journey started. And one of the most important things I learned was that a trainer is really a very careful listener. And it's just an amazing experience to kind of think about how this pans out, because as you're listening to yourself talking, and when your coach is actually hearing you, you learn a lot about yourself. So that's how my journey started. Lots of benefits. As the discussion progresses, I'd love to share some of those. But it was very interesting for me to kind of figure out, hey, it helped me, so it should help others. And that's how we actually brought a strong culture of coaching within Icertis. So, there it is.
Priya, may I request you to unmute yourself?
Sorry about that. Thanks so much, Monish. What we understand have been your takeaways from coaching are that coach is a very good listener, has to be a good listener, and benefits you said that you would share as we go along in the discussion. So with that, I'd like to move on to our next speaker. I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Next slide, please. Interesting. Just would like to reiterate that today's session is all about the manufacturing, IT, and ITES sectors. So you will see that our speakers belong to these domains. And I'm very pleased to introduce Parag Satpute, Managing Director, Bridgestone India, who is amidst us today. A mechanical engineer from Pune with an MBA from the University of Warwick, coupled with 2 decades of experience. He has also been the managing director and country manager of Sandvik India, and has worked with them, the Sandvik Group, for about 17 years and more. A strategic thinker, he is passionate about change management, collaborative leadership, and is a champion of gender equality. I've been given to understand that Parag has experienced coaching in the form of peer coaching as well as systemic coaching. Would like to invite Parag now and request him to share his experience, specifically if he can, on these 2 areas and otherwise. Over to you, Parag.
Thank you, Priya. Good evening, everyone. Real pleasure to be here and connecting to people from across the country, maybe also some international people. Very happy to be part of this esteemed panel and to share my experience with this topic, of which I am becoming more and more a fan of late. Just to give you a bit of background, like you saw in my intro, I spent many years with a company called Sandvik, which is a Swedish multinational. And I had the fortune of working with Sandvik in Europe for a long stint. So my first leadership experiences actually were in Europe. And the challenge there was further amplified because I was leading people from cultures which are very different from my own Indian culture. At that time, I think I benefited from having facilitators, I thought of them at that point, helping us to bring the team together and helping to bring the best out of the team. Also, because of the fact that I took on larger responsibilities relatively quickly, the company offered to give me some mentors or coaches, mainly from within the company. So that's the peer coaching that Priya was talking about. And my approach at that time was try to learn from them because they were experts in the field that I was operating in. So my image of a coach at that time was, it is a person who is an expert. But that thinking has a limitation, because when you get to the top of the ladder, when you get to be a CEO, then in a way you start to think, how can I learn from someone who's also probably been a CEO or not even a CEO? So that kind of limits your thinking. But my aha moment about coaching came a couple of years back and it came from the sporting world. So I had again the good fortune of playing a round of golf with Anirban Lahiri. Some of you might know he is one of the top golfers in India and arguably in the world as well. And throughout those 18 holes that we played, he was constantly checking with his past coach who happened to be on the course about minor modifications to his drive, about minor modifications to his game. And I thought, here is a person who's in the top 50 of the world, and he is humble enough and believes that he can still learn something new and get advice from a coach. And that kind of opened my eyes. So now I began to realize that people can get to the top of their profession, but even then, they have blind spots. They have an opportunity to further develop. And the job of a coach is to make that happen. So it is not necessary that a coach has to be the best in that field. A coach, I think the most important ability of a coach is to bring out the best qualities of a person, or to make a person the best version of himself or herself. So that is what kind of rekindled my interest in this topic. And I am using this now in my current team, and also to support some of my team members, and always looking for opportunities to learn myself. And I hope today's discussion will be another of those opportunities. I look forward to interacting with my fellow panelists and also with Jayshree through this panel discussion. So thanks and happy to be here.
Right. Parag, would you want to touch upon how you're applying coaching, how your team is benefiting, or how your organization, current or past, may have benefited? If you could just slightly touch upon that, then we could move on to the next.
Sure. A couple of things there. I think one, I also believe in I'm a strong believer in diversity in teams, right? And diversity in teams is good because it helps you make robust decisions. At the same time, it can bring its own challenges, because people with different personalities, they find it that much more difficult to come together quickly as a team. So that is one area where I believe a coach has a very important role to play, and that is in a team setting. So in my last couple of assignments, whenever I have said about creating leadership teams, one of the very, very important things that I do right at the outset is try and engage a coach who can help us to form this team, to create a cohesive group, so that we start to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses and are able to support each other by building trust. So that is one very important experience that I build upon. Another thing is, of course, individually, my team members, like I said, there is a fair amount of coaching with the leader does. So I spend a lot of time with my teammates, but it still is a relationship which is in the beginning quite formal. So I believe that if we can provide the right support through an external professional coach, then it can help that individual see their blind spots, like I said, and then start to gel into the new role and into the team much faster. One caveat with that, though, again, from experience, having an absolute amount of trust between the coach and the coachee is fundamental. And that only they two can decide. So it is not something which I, as a leader, can mandate. So that is something to watch out for when you are facilitating a coaching session for your team members. And we can talk more about that as we get into the panel discussion.
Thank you, Parag. I understand your takeaways from coaching have been that a coach brings out the best qualities in a person. There has to be trust that needs to be developed between a coach and an individual, his coachee. And you have experienced coaching. You've seen that it benefits teams in terms of bringing diverse teams together and making them cohesive when it comes to leadership teams especially. Thank you so much for these valuable insights. With that, we'd like to move on to our third speaker for this evening. Very glad to welcome Krishna Priya Nambudri, Head of HR, Sungard Availability Services. Priya is a management graduate from the Institute of Management Technology, Ghaziabad, and has again got 2 decades of experience in HR leadership roles. in various industries across Southeast Asia, India and Southeast Asia. Priya has dealt with organizational effectiveness matters ranging from talent management strategy to organizational development interventions. And I am aware that Priya is a big enabler of coaching in most of the organizations that she has worked with. So very happy to have Priya with us this evening. I'd like to invite you, Priya, to share your experience. Over to you.
Thanks, Priya. It's namesake, so it's good to have a namesake in the panel. Definitely very excited to be a part of this panel. Good to hear from Monish as well as Parag on their experiences, personal experiences, and how they have experienced coaching themselves. What I actually like to share initially today was something a little different. I mean, as an HR business partner, that I have been in so many years, I think, and this a lot of the HR people might relate to as well, is oftentimes I'm asked by leaders that what is the difference between coaching, mentoring, training? Why do you guys have so many different jargons for the same thing? I mean, aren't they all just the same professional development? And why do you have so many different jargons? And over a period of time, I kind of would like to share an analogy that I looked at, and maybe it might help some of you as well when you're having conversations. This relates to a little different. It's not the corporate, it's Indian mythology. So I don't know how many of you, I'm assuming most of you are familiar with our popular epic Mahabharata. And I think with the COVID and the reruns of it, I think even the young gen has kind of been reintroduced to this epic. So just a couple of analogies from there. So Arjun, I mean, for the international audience, if they're not familiar with who this person is, he's a protagonist, and he's from a royal family. He was taught the basics of warfare, how to become a good warrior, the skills and tools required to become a good warrior or a great warrior by his teacher, Dronacharya. So to me, this is training. Right from his childhood, he was advised, provided little real life experiences, was molded into understanding the principles and ways of becoming an accomplished and well-respected leader or warrior by Bhishma, who was, the senior most member of the royal family. To me, this is mentoring because this is more longer term, tuned towards overall career development, right? Obviously, Arjun became the greatest archer, warrior, and one of the most valued person in his army. But when he had to go in for the all-important battle against his cousins and people whom he loved and respected, he hesitated. He was very unsure of what should be the right path he should take. His confidence wavered. He needed guidance to ensure he reached his goal. And his goal was winning the war, the Mahabharata. And here he was guided by Krishna. To me, this is coaching because this is more shorter term, very focused on a particular goal, specifically to transform a behavior and enhance performance by providing a strategic perspective. So if you look at, there are different ways. Each of these is important and in my experience cannot be in lieu of another. So every aspect, whether it's training, mentoring, coaching, has its own importance and usefulness in an employee's development. And I think the beauty for us as HR professionals and business leaders is to be able to understand where to use what and for whom to use which part of this. And I think to me, that has been one of the greatest learnings that I have had as an HR professional. That's something which I try to, give a perspective to most of the leaders and people that I work with to make them understand this difference and then obviously be able to build on it and make the best. Obviously, there are a lot of other tips and coaching guidelines, which I guess once we get more into the panel discussion, we could talk about. But just wanted to start the session with this because it kind of gives us an understanding of what is it that we're actually dealing with when we mention coaching.
Thanks, Priya. That was brilliantly explained, the differentiation between training, mentoring, and coaching. Always a very common question posed to us HR folks. And thank you so much for walking us through the difference through this analogy that you drew. All right. So we're very glad to have these interesting lady and gentlemen amongst us as our panelists. I'd like to now introduce you to our moderator for the panel discussion coming up, Jayshree Kirtane, President, ICF Pune Chapter. Jayshree is also Executive Director, Alchemy, a boutique consulting and coaching firm. Originally a mathematical economist, Jayshree basically rewrote her life script many years ago, 16 years ago, and chose to become a facilitator of human processes. She's found her calling in coaching and has coached for more than 3,500 hours so far. And clients experience Jayshree as a coach for balance. Balancing the dichotomies of compassion and logic, it is implicit that such balancing leads to extraordinary results for individuals as well as organizations. Jayshree is a connoisseur of all forms of art, and that lends wings to her creativity, and we get to experience it in the chapter, definitely. Jayshree is the current president of the ICF Pune chapter, like I said, and she is also our moderator for the panel discussion this evening. Welcome, Jayshree, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Priya. And, so glad that, Parag, Monish and Priya, all of you made time to be a part of this panel. Thank you very much. I really feel privileged. So as, of course, you've been through the presentation of ICW, etc. I think one of the things that I just want to reiterate that ICW is about coaching as a process and not just about coaches. So it is about the process, and all of us are in that process together. Another disclaimer that I want to put right in the beginning is that the people who are organizing this, like us, are coaches. So we are not very smart with our technology. So sometimes we may have some glitches, sometimes there could be some time lags. So please bear with us, and be kind to us. Thank you very much. One of the questions that has been coming to my mind, and I must tell all the attendees, and we've crossed 200, by the way, so we are about 205 right now. So I must tell you, all the attendees that, we had a sync up call amongst the three of us, and we did discuss about some questions that we could dwell upon in the panel. But at the same time, I think the questions have kept coming up in my mind, and I'm sure that if I just throw a curveball or an out of syllabus question, all these three would be able to, just manage it very, very well. So, the first question, and I would invite, any one of you to pick up that and then build on that. The first question that comes to my mind is, okay, here we are in the celebration of ICW, and many of us are coaches and so on, right? And when we are into coaching and so many years and so many hours and so on, right? I think as coaches, sometimes we just start thinking that, this is what we must just go and offer our clients. We are coaches, so, you better be coached, something like that, right? But I think the fundamental question that we often forget to ask is, what are the problems or what are the challenges that organizations are actually looking to solve? And then coaching could be maybe one option, or sometimes may even not be the option. So I think, and in the current scenario, I think we just cannot be oblivious to what is happening around us, and the whole ambiguity, that has engulfed many of us, the whole life that has turned upside down in last some weeks. We just cannot, we can't ignore it when we are all together here, 200 odd people in the one room. So therefore, my question to, let's say, to Monish first is that, what are now going forward? What is it that organizations are actually looking to solve? And then we'll see whether coaching is one part of the solution.
Jayshree, so yeah, this is very close to my heart, as you know. You have been my coach before. I think it's a very interesting thing. I think you will hear a lot of, and I've heard a lot of things that organizations look for, and that's why they start coaching programs and so on. And Priya will have her views, I'm sure. I think one thing that I really believe that what I would look at, and this would be absolutely precious to me, really things. One is common sense. How do you your sense when a crisis like this hits, for example? And this is a big crisis, but you get hit with 15 crises every day, right? And when a crisis hits a person who has to make the decisions, how do you keep that balance? And I think Priya actually used two very interesting words, a dichotomy between compassion and logic. And somewhere in between, common sense actually fits in, right? Because it's, you think common sense is logic, it's actually also empathy mixed in. And you really want to make sure both of them come together, right? The second thing I look for, and especially what I have seen, it has helped me personally, is how do you make a decision quickly? You could deliberate, especially if it is a larger decision. Typically people think, more complex decision takes more time. And you look at a country like India and a country like the US, there were completely different responses to the COVID crisis, because someone or a group of people actually made decisions that had far-reaching impacts in a matter of weeks, right? And this is, billions or trillions of dollars worth of decisions and hundreds of thousands lives, which is much, supersedes all the money that goes through, because a life is really precious. Now, if you look at that kind of a decision and you look at a decision of hey, how do I solve this problem between two people, or how do I solve this problem of my customer getting angry? I think at a very different level, they are actually the same problem. You have to apply common sense, you have to apply empathy, compassion, and you have to bring that decision in that context and take that very quickly. I think those are the two things I really, really look for. And that would be, for all the coaching that we've been doing, all the programs for executive leadership that we've been doing, for upcoming leaders that we've been doing. I think if we can enhance those skills, to me, it's priceless, really.
Thank you. Parag, would you like to add something to that, or maybe a completely different?
Yeah, so I mean, a part of what Monish said really resonates with me. I think the world around us is going to change permanently. That is my sense. So it is not something which is going to be with us for a few months and then we go back to exactly as it was before. I think first is the realization of that. And it took me also a few weeks to come to that realization. Initially all of us thought, okay, 3 weeks, 4 weeks of lockdown, and then we will go back. But fortunately or unfortunately, that is not going to be the case. Some ground realities will have changed. And especially in the near term, and for near term, I say anywhere between 6 months to 18 months, it is going to be a very, very volatile and uncertain world. To give you a simple example, yesterday we were allowed to open our plant in Chakan and with only local people. So we quickly gathered people from Talegaon and then started to get the plant up and running. Today, news is out that Talegaon is under lockdown. And Pune people are allowed to go in. So this is a very, very unpredictable, uncertain, volatile. I mean, we had the term VUCA, but it is going to be extra VUCA. So we need people to be very agile, and we need systems to be very agile. And maybe it's a challenge in the manufacturing space. Maybe it's a challenge with Japanese companies like ours, that we believe in long-range planning. We believe in forecasting and following forecast very, very religiously. So the world ahead of us for the next 18 months is not going to allow us that comfort. So the need for me as a leader today is how to get all the system and the people that I have who are pretty good to think in a completely different way and to be agile to react to this kind of situation.
Thank you. Priya, would you like to add something to this?
No, so what I would actually agree with both Parag and Monish, because I think the VUCA world today is, like Parag rightly said, it's not just VUCA, it's extra VUCA. I think it's changed the way that we need to mold our leaders. I think what worked earlier is no longer going to work tomorrow. Like what we felt was working yesterday is not going to work tomorrow. So I think that's where a coach really helps you unlock your own potential, because even the coach might not have all the answers. And I think that's what I guess even Parag and Monish mentioned, that, they help you figure out things. And I think that's the true development that we are looking for in each leader or manager. And I think coaching helps individuals do that. And I think that's, to me, solving a lot of the business problems is how do you unlock and think differently on a daily basis. And I think that's going to be the challenge for all of us going forward. And I think coaching can definitely help a long way in that. And I guess, be, I think, priceless for a lot of people in the way they think and behave.
Thank you. And, along with all of you three panelists, we've got one more special guest here. We've got Suhas Kelkar, who has joined us from Austin, Texas. And some of you, I think Monish and Priya, both of you know him also. So Suhas, my question to you, I mean, in the same context, because you are, miles away from us and working in a startup. So Suhas is the Chief Product Officer of Clear Data. So working in a startup environment and maybe with a multi-generational workforce, what is your take on this? How is work going to change and what can coaching do for that?
Thanks, Jayshree. Hi, Monish, Parag, and Priya. It's a small world. Happy to be seeing your faces. And thanks, Jayshree, for inviting me to this great panel and webinar. So once again, hi from the sunny Austin, Texas. I've been associated with coaching for many years now, and I happened to chance into coaching, and it has really changed my career and has changed my world. If I look back and have to give advice as to why I feel coaching is important, I can think of a couple of things that come to my mind. And some of those might be applicable to many of you who are in those phases of your career. So first is, you all may have heard the Peter principle, right? You keep on rising in your organization till you reach a level of respective incompetence. And I see many people around in large organizations that actually reach that level of respective incompetence, and they get very comfortable there. And they kind of tend to stay in that glass ceiling forever and ever. And I feel that coaching can really help you break through that glass ceiling and realize your true potential. So that is one thing I've found applicable that really helps coaching. Second one is that Parag kind of already covered that it can get lonely at the top, right? As you actually start getting promoted and you really become a senior management, it starts to get really lonely. And at that level, it becomes very hard to find people around you who you can actually use as sounding board and such. And so I think coaching really, the good coach will actually understand that and help you find the right connections and or help you in that situation. And then lastly, I feel that coaching is becoming even more important now than ever, as Priya and Parag have already kind of touched upon that. With if you think back about 2008, we had a recession, and that recession actually gave us the gig economy. What I feel this COVID-19 situation is giving us is that we are actually finally starting to realize that gig economy potential. So all of us are working from home. All of us are becoming much more independent. What that brings is that much more isolation and much more being on your own. You miss that social interaction, social connect. And if you have a good coach, you can actually continue to remain motivated and continue to remain focused. So I feel those couple of things are really what makes coaching really important in today's day. So I'm gonna take a pause and give it back to Jayshree. I know I'm not the main panelist, so back to you, Jayshree.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks. Okay. So now that we know that, like from all of you, you've said that it is the agility that's going to matter. It is the common sense, the quickness in decision making, and the gig economy that will come up, because the workforce of today and tomorrow is never going to be the same as the workforce of yesterday. Now, while doing that, and all of you, sort of mentioned that coaching will be helpful in this changing world, right? So now, let's say the world is changing. Then there are coaches, and we all kind of, in principle, agree that coaching is going to be great for this changed world. So in this changing world, when you actually hire a coach, right, and at any level in the organization, or if a coach comes to you and says, hey, I'm a coach, what is it that you actually would look for when you go ahead and say, yes, I hire you as a coach? What should a coach say, or what should a coach do? What should a coach be like?
So, Jayshree, I'll take that up. So,
Go ahead, go ahead.
okay, two things. So you asked when would we approach a coach, and then what would we look for in a coach, right? I mean, if my understanding is right. So as HR, obviously, this is a point that we get asked quite a lot of times, right? So to me, couple of things that I would look for, right? I mean, obviously, as HR, unfortunately, we always have to work within constraints of time, effort, cost, so many things. So to me, when would I look for coaching is when, two things. When there is a goal which is worth fighting for, or where there is will justify the return on investment. That's very, very important, because the goal has to be something which is important enough for the organization and the individual to invest in that coaching. Now, you might say that, oh, then it has to be a very grandiose goal. Not necessarily. I mean, it doesn't have to be, I want to change the world or something like that. But it has to be something which matters to the organization to a great extent, and it is going to define not just for the organization, but even an individual. So it could be even as simple, and you're aware of this, Jayshree, because of the assignment that we've been doing, is it could be even as simple as changing a behavior, a style of communication, the way of interaction and managing a team, which could have a huge positive impact on the employee morale. But not doing that is having a huge negative impact, right? So the goal has to be very clear. So to me, that's important. When you would hire, is when you have a very clear goal in mind. What you would look for in a coach is $1 million question. But to me, I think it's there are right coaches for the right individual. There are no right coaches in general. It's like a doctor. To me, it's more of, you build that relationship. Okay, obviously you look at credentials, you will look at qualifications, you will look at, are they, and I guess even Parag or Monish mentioned that, right? That they have to be in a similar field. At least they should understand something to how you are operating, right? For example, a football coach cannot be coaching a cricket team, something like that, right? But at the same time, it's not necessary that he has to be the greatest cricketer to be the, the best coach. Rather, it might not be that way. So I think the person has to understand the realities of the business that the individual is in. So has to have the knowledge to a certain extent, need not be the expert, but definitely I think things like trust and that relationship building is what we need to. And I think HR plays a very important role in that, because HR is kind of the conduit who knows the coach, knows the individual who is going to be coached, and to a great extent can actually be the facilitator to ensure that the match is a right one. And I think that should be the role of HR in organizations, is what I feel. That's just my points.
Thank you.
So, Jayshree, can I add on to that? I think
Please.
while Priya was speaking, one thing triggered. Of course, HR has a very important role to play in facilitating this process. At the same time, I believe this is not a two-way agreement. It is almost a tripartite agreement between the coachee, the coach, and the manager, the leader of the coach. Because in a way, the coach is supporting the leader. Like if I want to coach someone from my team, then it has to be a tripartite agreement and an absolute level of trust between these three. The reason why it is necessary to bring the leader on board is one, they know what the direction to go is. So eventually I am tasked with delivering the vision of my company. So I want my team to start pushing toward that vision. To a large extent, also, if I've identified an individual to be coached, then I have some initial idea of the strengths, the development areas. So that's a good starting point to have. And eventually, an external coach will be there for a limited amount of time. It can be a few months, it can be a couple of years, but it's not going to be there perennially. And that's why the leader or the organization being fully involved and part of this is very important. So that was one point I wanted to add on. And then how do you select a coach, right? That's the other question. And there again, it is not, I agree completely with Priya. It has to be one-to-one matching. A coach might work for one member of my team, that same person might not work for another. So there has to be a matching of personality there. But some key underlying skills, I would say, trust is very important, an ability to build trust, ability to listen, actively listen. So you don't want someone who's going to come and tell you what to do. I mean, usually we are getting people into the coaching program when they're already senior in their respective roles. So they're not used to just coming and doing what they're told to do. So the ability to listen and then influence that person. I think that is the key skill. Now, how do you judge that? That's another whole new ball game. Yeah. So I'd be happy to hear from the others whether they have some template on how to judge for or how to evaluate for trustworthiness and listening ability and things like that.
Yeah, I would like to add, it is actually very interesting. I think I'll split the problem in two. One is, when it's personal coaching, and one is when you're applying coaching at scale to an organization systematically, right? I think the first one, obviously, I completely agree, Parag, with you and Priya. It's like a doctor. You have to choose the coach. You have to be comfortable. I think my template would be very easy. If I'm comfortable enough to share my biggest fears, and usually you only get to know that if you spend some time with that. So it's not like you look at the qualifications, you look at the background, you look at everything else and say, oh, this is going to work for me. It's like a doctor which eventually becomes your family doctor, right? So I think that's the first. The second one, which is I think which is trickier, because the first one is, it's your personal time and you invest in it, and you encourage, if you want other leaders to kind of take that up, you encourage them and you make it happen. The second one is probably trickier, and that is where also a lot of your investment goes through. Because if you don't do it right, your return on investment is abysmal. You've actually wasted hours and hours of time, not to mention the costs of doing that. And I think for that template for me is, hey, is this kind of system that the coach comes with able to scale? I think that's my first question. Does it apply to 5 people, and can it apply to 50? Because eventually I want to go there as soon as I see those changes that happen on the ground. And that means it's not just the coach, but the team that comes with the coach that actually makes that difference. And I haven't seen, and Jayshree, you can back me up there a little bit. I haven't seen one person have that full kind of broad sense of making that change. It's always a team. And so for that second portion, I would evaluate the team, not the coach. And that makes, for us, it's actually made a big difference. And we have tried experimenting. It's not that it's a one size fits all. It's not one coach that works in every situation. And it's been a revealing experience, really.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Thank you. And yeah, I think you mentioned, Monish, that about offering coaching at scale, and there, like what you said, and let me also confess that many of us who are coaches here in the panel or in the attendees, I think often coaches are solo flyers. Often coaches are solo flyers, right? Because each one thinks that the model that I follow is the best model. The listening skills that I have are the best skills, or whatever it is, or the hourly rate that I charge has to be that phenomenal rate, or whatever it is, right? So often coaches are solo flyers, and therefore it is hard to find like-minded coaches who can come together, fly together and create that big value for the organization. So I agree with you, because then the values must match, styles must match, and the same level of trust among the team of coaches and the team of coachees or coaching clients in the organization. So it is, yeah, it is not easy always to have that. What you say
And I
is
think, I'll fall back to what Priya said. One more thing she said was she mentioned Sachin Tendulkar, right? And it's a classic example. You need a coach when Sachin was a kid, kind of making sure that he could realize his potential. But the critical part of the success, if you look at the Indian team, is the coach that coaches everyone in the team, right? And that actually is not one. You have a bowling coach, you have a fielding coach, you have a fitness coach, you have people who allow you to navigate the media, manage your personal life, your psychology, all of that, right? And I think that is where, if I had to kind of predict where the coaching profession needs to go, I think it would be that would be my kind of input to this, that this has to be a scalable model, and it can be a scalable model in my mind. And then people like Priya can really realize that value at organizational scale. I think most organizations struggle because they tend to find, out of 10 coaches, they tend to find 2 that really work well and 8 that don't. You do really want to find the model where 8 work really well and 2 work decently.
absolutely. One of the things that is often said, and all three of you are whatever, more than 2 decades of experience, Monish slightly more. And one of the things that we keep hearing in many of the leadership, either courses or seminars or in our own learning circles, we keep hearing that the leaders of today and of tomorrow, for them, coaching itself as a style of leadership or coaching itself as a skill to influence their people. So one is to have people like us who are external coaches, so who will come, do something to whatever is their best ability and go out after a few months. But the other is, leaders having coaching skills. So that is something that is very often discussed nowadays in leadership circles. So I would like to ask all of you, one by one, you could just say as to what is your opinion. I mean, this is what we hear, but it doesn't have to be true. What's your opinion about it?
So
Maybe I can start.
Listening till, I'm just figuring out how long Priya can keep quiet. So that
let me go first this time. And so, yeah, I mean, this is at senior levels and CEO, CXO level. I think this is absolutely important, because the reason being, you are gathering around you a team of people who are respective experts in their field. Yeah, my HR head is the top HR guy, finance, and I'm not an expert in that, right? So I'm not a finance expert. I'm not well, HR is people, so I would like to think I have some insights on that. But there are many different skills, and these are top guys. So what can I as a leader do to enhance their performance? And when I start to list down, yes, I can help build a vision. I can help take away any hurdles that are in their way, stopping them from performing their best job. Then that, in a way, is a definition of coaching, right? And I definitely believe that as CEOs or as senior leaders, we need to develop these skills. And especially if you have risen very fast through the organization, it is not something that comes naturally, because you rise because of action, you rise because of your ability to take decisions, you rise because of your ability to execute and instruct people, in the initial part of your career. And what this is asking you to do is actually counterintuitive, because you're saying, okay, rather than tell people what to do, you're saying, okay, what would you do or enable them to do? So this is a shift that I think every leader needs to undergo at different points. I mean, some people might do it earlier and others might do it a bit late, but that needs to happen. Otherwise, we will end up with the typical adage about what got you here will not get you there. And this is something which many young, fast-growing managers sometimes are faced with. And I think the shift there is to become more of a coaching approach rather than a directive approach. So I'm fully in favor of this. and try to help my team to get there.
So Priya, you have to go next.
Yes, challenge to Monish, yes, challenge to Priya.
Okay, so no, so I think in Sungard, I guess one of the things that we have looked at, and I believe with what Jayshree was saying, is every leader or manager needs to know coaching. Now, whether they do it, whether they don't do it, whether they have an interest or not, is one aspect to it, right? But every leader needs to have the understanding of that. So in most of our leadership development, right from the manager development that we do, we introduce coaching as a concept, the whole framework of coaching and grow. I think that's something most of the coaches would associate with. We actually introduce that. So at a kind of a first line manager level, we just introduce the concept, give them an idea of what they can look at and how they could use the model, right? So that's the first step, that we introduce the concept to them. Then when we have the senior leadership development training that we do, we actually have an entire session or a module which talks about how they can do coaching for their teams and give them some assignments wherein they need to coach an individual. So it at least introduces, so it does two things for us as as a company. One is, first, gets them an understanding of how valuable coaching can be, not just for the coach, but even for the coaching. So it automatically builds that, I would say, baseline for us that coaching is a very important aspect of professional development. So, it helps us from that. And second is, it also helps us identify if there are, kind of, and I think one of the things we spoke about even in our catch-up, sync-up call earlier was informal coaching or democratized coaching, So it kind of helps us build that culture of, that everybody understands, what is it and how it is. And leaders, once they start exhibiting this, it kind of then cascades down into the trenches as well. So that's kind of the way that we have done it. And I think it's helped us. It's definitely helped us.
Right. Yeah, I would go a little bit controversial, if I may. I think I disagree a little bit with Parag. Every leader, everyone, I would say, not just a leader, everyone is a coach. A mom, a dad, an elder brother, a friend, all of them play that role, all the time. And I think that we wouldn't need formal coaches at all, I believe, if we had a thermometer and we could actually look at, hey, is this, benchmark, am I doing a good job or not? I think if you do that every time I try to tell somebody something, or influence somebody, and I had that barometer or thermometer, I wouldn't need coaching. I sincerely believe that. The reason I need coaching personally, and I'm sure other people do in different phases, is I think in different phases of life or in different moments or in different scenarios, you need to think differently, and the human mind is just not capable of doing that naturally. So somebody has to influence that unnatural thinking or behavior, and that is coaching. If I had to really explain it in layman's terms for myself, in terms of what did I get from that, and what I expect the organization to get. Now, this is, at the end of the day, you would say this is just philosophy, big words, but what does it actually mean? I think if I have to simplify it, I think you have the coach in you. You need someone as a mirror, kind of figure out, how do you develop that trait and how do you apply it in the right times, in the right places. A good leader and a great leader, both of them are coaches. I think the great leader has the ability to influence, like Steve Jobs, for example, millions of people. And that is coaching. At the end of the day, you are being influenced by someone's actions, by the way someone presents, by the way someone delivers a product to change your lifestyle. And that's what coaching is all about anyway. Right?
Oh, okay. This is interesting. And one of the things that...
Did that just make you speechless, or am I imagining?
Yeah, it is the mirror going speechless. No, I also actually parallelly looked at the chat box. But anyway, yeah, I think one of the things that also, I mean, what Monish, the word that you used, right? And we actually take pride, coaches take pride in saying that we are just the mirror. And the coaches or the coaching clients are just looking at their own reflection, and coaches are only providing the mirror. So how good that mirror is how clean that is, and which means how clean our lenses are as coaches. I think that is our lifetime journey, to have those clean lenses, to be non-judgmental, to be accepting and appreciative of all the clients, whatever may be the client in front of the mirror. So one question that comes to my mind is, because all three of you have experienced coaching at one or some point in time, and we spoke about how should the coach be. What is it, that transformation that even you went through, right? As a coachee, what change did you have to make within yourself to be a good coachee? So that's
Yeah. And I'll supersede Priya and Parag this time for a change, right? Because my answer will be very short. I think big change I had to do was to make sure I listen to myself. When all the sessions I've had so far, I think I've been cultivating consciously. First was very hard, but after that, cultivating consciously the ability to actually hear myself think and hear myself, right? I think, and the mirror analogy really is perfect. I think that one big change kind of helps you get the most out of that kind of a relationship, the value that it adds, to yourself, and how you grow. And I think that's been a revelation.
Thank you. So, one thing that we have now, and Monish, probably, I think this is a surprise for you. Kalpesh, I'm going to request you to play one video.
Sure, Jayshree. Just a moment.
November.
Thank you.
Shall I start?
Now Monish is worried.
Shall I begin that, Jayshree?
Please, yes, please.
Hello everyone, I'm Praveen Shinde. I work with Icertis as a director of platform engineering. I got an opportunity to work with my coach as part of learning initiative of Icertis. I'm a great fan of self-help books. I've read most of them. When I had discovery session with her, I asked her, what different are you going to offer me here? She smiled and said, let's begin the journey and you can tell me if you are getting anything valuable or not. Believe me, it was a unique experience. I realized the difference between teaching and coaching. Teaching is a one-way communication or sometimes two-way communication. But having a coach is an inside-out experience. Coach never provides you a ready-made answer, but enables you to discover tools. It boosted my decision-making capabilities that helped speed up delivery. I became more empathic, not only in professional life, but at home as well. I think having coach gives you different perspective or new perspective to life, and it makes journey more fulfilling. I thank Icertis and my coach for this unique opportunity. Thank you so much.
Over to you, Jayshree. Yeah.
Kalpesh. Thank you, Kalpesh. Yeah. So I mean, this was a pleasant surprise, wasn't it? So Monish, I think, we brought up Praveen's video for two reasons. So there is one thing that, that Praveen mentioned in his video, right? That coaching influenced not just his professional life in terms of quick decision making, etc., but also expanding his empathy in other areas of his life as well. So I would like to hear, all of your thoughts on what coaching does, not just to a person as a professional, and but also to the whole being. I think any quick thoughts on that would be very helpful.
Okay.
Now, yes.
I can take it. I think it is, Yeah, it changes you, definitely does. There's no question about it. I think it depends on how you're taking it. Not everybody takes it the way probably, what you saw in the video. It's always there's a famous Harry Potter sentence, it's the taking out, not the putting in. And I think it is like, sometimes you have to work it that way to get it right. And one of these things, the qualities of kind of making sure that it affects you, not just in your professional life, but in other areas, also kind of, goes back to what I said before, that if you can actually take decisions better and faster, and if you can do it, with compassion, and you can apply common sense, I think it just changes you as a person. It's not just what you do as your job, but is what you do every day. So this putting in or taking out or drawing out is really, what you're looking for. A good coach actually draws out the good things and puts in good habits. And I think that's where you really get, all the benefits across the board. It's definitely not just professional. And you can't have a coach who only focuses on, your professional behavior, because your behavior affects everything in life at the end of the day.
Right, absolutely. Gauri and Priya, so that is our Priya Damle. Do we have any questions that we can take at this point in time? Because people have been typing away questions.
Yes, we've got plenty. In
Please
fact,
go ahead.
we've been sifting through them, and we'll try and see how best we can take as many as we can. Gauri, you want to go with the first one, please?
Yes, I can go. So this question is to Monish. Monish, there was this question, as when you are selecting coaches, what is the hit ratio? And then you have commented that it's 2 out of 10. So our coaches would like to know that what really can be improved, and what kind of assessments do you do before engaging coaches?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think the 2 out of 10 happens because, as Jayshree said, coaches tend to be individuals, right? There are very few kind of groups that come together, or people who have like-minded intent, and the system that works and scales come together. So I don't think it reflects in any way the quality of the coach. It's just the fit, right? And so when I said 2 out of 10, if you have to, it's as simple as, if you want to buy 100 pencils, and if you have to go to 100 different stores to buy it, that whole process becomes extremely inefficient, right? Whereas if you can find one good supplier, or maybe two, and so, kind of spread the risk out, and get 50 pencils each, that whole process becomes more efficient. I think that's the problem we've been facing. I don't think it's the quality of coaching. I think, everyone who aspires to be a coach, and who goes through the pain of certification, going through being a certified coach, there's a lot of hard work behind it. And a coach is like at least all my interactions, a coach is like a psychologist, and psychologists have problems themselves. It's not an easy life, right? A doctor doesn't have an easy life. So there's a lot of commitment behind this to be a coach, right? And so it doesn't mean that 2 out of 8 out of 10 coaches are bad. They're just not good fits for the organization. And I think that is where my comment stemmed from, that if you want to make it 8 out of 10, you have to get people together. I think that should be the future of coaching, because if you don't come together as coaches to offer and it's not average, it doesn't have to be average, it's best of breed that fits a particular type of organization. And that's where the specialization of coaching probably will come from. I don't know if I made sense, but that's my theory.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, the next question is for Parag. It comes from Pushpendra Singh. What Pushpendra would like to know is that he would like to know more about your team coaching. When do you bring coach? How did it take place? Was it together or individual? How much time did it take, and did it fail sometimes? He gives a background and says that he himself has been involved in building teams, diverse teams, in fact, for 3 MNCs. And given the diversity in terms of region, company, ethnic background, etc., that's where his question stems from.
So thank you for the question, Pushpendra, and I'm sure you have experience with this. Yeah, so how long should it be? Has it ever failed? So let me put it this way. I don't think it has ever failed, but sometimes it has been wildly successful and other times less successful. But at every time I have benefited from it. So I swear by it for sure. Where do I see it? I mean, especially when you're forming new teams, and in at least 3 of my assignments, I've had to come in to a business and set up a new team almost from scratch. And in those situations, I've found it most useful to accelerate the process of getting to know each other, of understanding each individual's strengths and development areas, and how to support each other. So that is what primarily I have aimed to do through these sessions. And I think it is a long-term process. So it's not one session, it's not 2 sessions. So typically it is something which I would draw over a year or a year and a half, because this is the amount of time it takes for people in senior positions coming from different backgrounds to first get to know the business and then figure out how to leverage the strengths of other team members. And in cases where it has worked, it has been really, really great. And it didn't, I must say, always work from the word go. So there is always an initial period where people are figuring out what this is all about. Some have had experience, some have not had experience. But after that initial period, most of the time it has moved smoothly. Another tip or another thing which has worked for us is to use certain tools. HR professionals, coaches, of course, are experts in this. What this does is, and tools could be anything. It could be MBTI, which I've used a number of times. It could be FireOB. It could be other tools. It helps to make the discussion more objective. Otherwise, it can become personalized, right? That you are good at this and you're bad at that, or these are the things you need to control. But when you come from the background of using an established tool, it makes it much more objective. And you can give constructive feedback to each other, and which is a very, very important process of becoming cohesive as a team and starting to leverage on each other's strengths. So I hope I answered your question, Pushpendra.
Okay, so
Thanks, Parag. Gauri, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So this question is to Monish and Priya, and Pradeep Natarajan wants to know what % of coaching assignments in your organization are in executive, high potential, mid-level managers or specialists, or is there only an emphasis on leadership and team coaching?
Priya, all yours. I know Pradeep very well, so I'm asking him as a friend.
Okay, so so definitely as a HR professional, like I mentioned earlier as well, right? I mean, as an HR person, when you are offering coaching, you know, you would look at some of these aspects. Now, in my experience, usually when we would look at coaching, we would look at high potentials, right? And that does not mean they have to be the senior most in the team or anything like that. They have to be the most valued, promising, capable. We would typically in experience use coaching for high potentials. It could be mid-level managers, it could be senior engineer, it could be at any level, but it has to be high potential. That's the way we would look at it. You know, mentoring, training, those would be other things that you could look for you know, different scenarios, which I'd mentioned earlier as well, right? That you might use different ways of development for different people, but specifically coaching, I would recommend that it should be used more for high potentials, because then the you know, the way, I mean, the return on investment purely from a organization's perspective, when you're investing that amount of time and energy of a formal coach and a coachee, I think you would have a much more success ratio from that perspective. I mean, and I'm sure people will have a different opinion about it. But that's my personal view, and that's what I feel.
So I'm going to just interject here and ask Monish. Monish, if you remember, we had spoken about it. This kind of ties up to our democratization of coaching, right? So if we had all the resources in the world, then everybody in an organization would receive coaching. But at the same time, like Priya has brought in the point of the return of investment. So how can we? So what is your opinion, Monish? I mean, how can we really make this gift available to more people?
No, absolutely. And I think it was the same logic as does everybody in the organization get a laptop, right? When it became affordable, it became ubiquitous. And, you know, the advantages are obvious, right? And it's exactly like that with coaching. I think one of the things, I deeply believe in is anything that needs to scale needs to standardize, right? And standardization is very hard, slightly qualitative, even if you use instruments and various techniques and so on, it's still a qualitative, job if you look at coaching. I've not actually done an experiment, but I plan to do that this year. Is that, we always think hypo brings out the most ROI, but I don't know if, the people who actually need that more are probably not the hypos. So you probably want to focus on them and see, do you get that ROI? Because if you can lift the whole organization up at the pyramid, at the base, if you can lift it from the base, you're making much more progress than just lifting the tip up, right? And I think that is, that's the trick here. That's the challenge. And I think one thing definitely is, something that, people have successfully done in other areas where, this is also a qualitative thing, is to make sure you get to the approach of train the trainer. So you don't set up coaching programs to coach people, but you set up coaching programs to create coaches within the organization. And I think that is one thing that probably helps you scale faster, especially because now these coaches actually know the organization inside out, which is sometimes not a very good thing. You need an outside perspective too, but you can balance it out. You can take these inside coaches and you couple them up with external coaches, and actually that's how you scale it out to the whole organization. But I completely believe that this is the prerogative almost everybody in the organization. It's just that whether it's professional, those are the decisions companies make. Is it professional or is it amateur? Like, I'm coaching someone is amateur. But if I hire a professional, then it costs money directly. So you always have that balance. But you definitely need it. No question about it.
Just to add to what Monish said in terms of coach, like train the trainer, coach the coaches, I think that is something even we have been thinking about. And I think, like it's difficult to accomplish that, because like we've already been talking about, coaching is a very personalized experience, right? It's not like a skill training that you can train and then, train so many more people. So getting to that balance of where we would be able to have that qualitative expertise in different coaches and democratize it is going to be a challenge. But yeah, I mean, I think that's again something that we've been thinking of in terms of how to make that more a reality. It is difficult. It's not an easy problem to solve, as it was with Train the Trainer. But it is an interesting problem to solve, I would say.
Yeah, and I think it, as the whole training, the concept and the measurement of results matures, I think this area is also mature, right? We talk about Arjuna and Krishna and Tendulkar and Atsarikar, but these are individuals, super coaches. We really need to make sure that these coaches kind of come into the mainstream and do that. And also, I think one more comment, I was just looking at the chat. I think, we also sometimes I wonder, do we even know the meaning of hypo? when we say, hey, these are high potential individuals, these are selected by managers who themselves might be in need of coaching. They don't know the potential when they see it, probably. I'm just guessing. So this hypo also is a tricky term. It's not, it's already carries the biases of the organization that you're trying to improve on, right? So there is always this interesting kind of qualitative discussion on, how do you select people with a limited budget for these programs.
Jayshree, could you unmute yourself?
We may have time for a couple more questions.
Right. I have one ready. It's something which has come into our list of questions, and something which I also relate to it, because it's something which I always wonder. So I'd like to open it up to all three, and they could decide, or Jayshree could say who could go ahead, since we have limited time. So coaching is supposed to be domain agnostic or knowledge agnostic, right? Yet we have coaches who are coaches in the business area, right? So what kind of business knowledge is a coach supposed to have in order to be a good, effective coach in a business situation or a business environment? For example, manufacturing.
Since Parag has been quiet some time.
Yeah, I saw that coming. So yeah, I mean, this is first of all, I agree that you don't need to be very, very industry specific knowledge. Coaching is agnostic to that extent, but understanding of the context is important at the same time, right? I mean, I heard the analogy between cricket and football. My view is maybe the same coach could work. So we run a tire company, could manufacturing, say a construction company, construction equipment manufacturing is similar. I don't think it will be such an issue. But could suddenly a coach who has worked a lot with startups, could they come in and facilitate the kind of company that we are running? It would depend, again, what we are trying to do with the company. If we are trying to have a shift in culture, we are trying to get people to act very agile, act very fast, then you might want to bring in someone from the outside. If you want to just bring out the best in the way people are, then you try to bring in people who understand the context. So again, I would say that in principle, I would say coaches are agnostic of the specific industry. Understanding of the context is very important. But most importantly, what are you trying to achieve with that initiative? That probably will help you decide which way to go.
Super.
Thanks, Parag. Thank you.
I would just like to add to that, what Parag said is, I think it's more than the industry. I think it's what problem that you're trying to solve, right? So, for example, when we look at coaches for different aspects, what is it that, that we would want? I think it depends upon type of issue or the type of problem that you are addressing the coaching for. And I think that would define what kind of a coach would you need, whether you need a business coach, you need, and what kind of expertise, so to say, do they bring to the table. So I think it has to be more, and that's where when we look at the match, which we'd spoken about earlier, this would be one of the points that you would look at when you're doing that match for, any coachee. So it cannot be that every coachee will have the same, coach. At the same time, the same coach could have different coaches from different industries and be equally effective with each one of them, right? So I think that would be one of the criteria that we look at when we do a match. Absolutely. But they need to have some background in that particular problem that we are trying to address.
So one question that just came to my mind, and I'm sorry, I'm just overriding your Q&A, Gauri and Priya. I will start by asking that question to Parag and then later to Monish also. Is that, for example, I think Gauri mentioned that, Parag, you've been a champion of gender equality, right? And I've seen some of your, pink initiatives also at the factory and otherwise. Let's say when we are talking about this cause, is there any connection between, let's say, coaching as a practice and either readying the organization, towards having equality, or readying the women towards taking more, more responsibilities and so on? So, does coaching play any role in your mind in this context, for example?
So, Jayshree, to be honest, I have not drawn the connection, honestly.
Okay.
Now, but when you ask the question, what comes to my mind? And we have been talking about it. Coaching is about helping people discover themselves, helping bring out the best in people, helping them think in ways they might not have done in the past because the environment is changing. So, to that extent, in a company where the gender diversity is low, if you are trying to change that and increase it, then obviously the mindset of the whole organization has to change, and a number of things have to be done, starting from very structural things as well. In the
Yes.
past, some of our sales officers did not have women's toilets. So how can you hire for gender diversity when you're not providing the basics? So a host of things to be done.
Yes.
But when you ask the question, my thoughts went back to some encounters I've had, and yes, it might be important to change the mindset of some big leaders as well, because they have not been used to this. And what way to change it? There are multiple ways. Coaching is one of them.
Coaching is one of them. Sure.
And for me, Jayshree, I think the answer is actually very simple. Again, already answered. It's a dichotomy between compassion and passion and logic, right? Gender equality, LGBT, tolerance towards diversity. It all falls in this, dichotomy. And that's what, if the coach does that right, it takes care of these problems systemically as well, I believe. I think that, that's the dichotomy actually produces this problem. If you remove the dichotomy, or at least persist in removing the dichotomy, this goes away.
The coexistence of both of them, compassion and logic. And you are very right. I think in many coaching conversations with many senior leaders, I think leaders seem to think that I can be only at one end of the spectrum at a time. And if I become very compassionate, then what will happen to my logical mind, and vice versa? So yeah, I think but the sweet spot lies somewhere, where these two things come together. Thank you. I think that question just came to me because coaching is all. Yes.
Sorry, Jayshree, I just 1 second there. And that's where a value system actually falls. That was the other thing. The value system that we have in Icertis, if you look at compassion and logic, it's exactly where in between. When logic tells you something and the heart tells you something, where do you fall back to? That's the value that your company stands on.
Okay. So we are just 4 minutes away from the closing time. Kalpesh, do you have any poll for us?
Yes, Jayshree, I'll just launch the poll. 1 moment.
Yeah, thank you.
So this is for the takeaway that people would have from the session. And I'm just going to launch the poll for a minute.
Yes, please. Cool. People, just 25 seconds to vote.
Okay, I think 62% have already voted, Jayshree.
Yes.
Waiting for 20 more seconds. Team would appreciate your responses.
We never realized 1 minute is that long.
Yeah. Great. Here I'm ending the polling. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. So
That's the results.
Yeah. Coaching unlocks potential. Oh, thank you. Thanks, Kalpesh. I think I'm going to hand over now to Gauri and Priya for the closure. I think one of the things that I'm very pleased to look at is when people said coaching unlocks potential, and that has the highest takeaway, because I think I think that has kind of made our day, because we wanted people to just go away feeling empowered, and it is so much more important in today's times than any time ever. So, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, my friends, Parag, Monish, and Priya. And hand over to you, Gauri. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So thank you once again, Monish, Priya, and Parag, for sharing your wonderful stories and insights. And every word is definitely very inspiring, very motivating. And I'm sure that there were a lot of questions that our coaches had, and we really got a great chance to, know it from what really is the need of the business and what is the demand, and how really the coaches can adapt to the coming trends and things like that. So thank you once again. When we talk about the audience, they have been an excellent audience. We have a lot of Q&A. The chats have been active, and a great round of applause to all of them as well. Kudos to the volunteers from the chapter who have done a great job in putting up both the sessions. And I request Kalpesh to bring out all the volunteers who have contributed. Please put them on the screen.
Sure.
We need to see the faces behind the hard work. Yeah. Aniruddha, we can't see you. You've been the most.
Yeah,
Okay,
Aniruddha
great.
has been working day and night for last.
Yeah.
Just a moment. Sheila is also joining in.
Yes, Sheila and Vivek. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
And thanks to panel members. Thank you.
yeah, and thanks to everybody, and a message to all the coaches. So life is really interesting, and let's rock. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for the
Thank
lovely
you.
session. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.